is Windows 10 came out maybe about a month ago or so. I don't have it yet. In fact, neither of the computers that I have that are running 7 and 8.1 got the Windows 10 update, oddly enough. I was planning on installing it on a Windows 8.1 computer that I have, but for some reason the update just never came around to me, so go figure. Who knows, man? Windows is kind of weird. But unfortunately, the spy features have been retroactively put into Windows 7. So in case you don't know, Windows 10 has a lot of different new features that were not in Windows 7. Some of those are, well, it's kind of hard to explain what they are really. It's sort of like reporting back to Microsoft for quality assurance reasons and all that sort of thing. But it's kind of obvious that that's not the real reason for it. It's pretty obvious that it's actually for spying on what you're doing on your machine. It becomes pretty obvious when you actually look at the functions. So it's kind of obnoxious, to say the least, that we have to deal with that sort of thing. Because when you get a operating system, you don't really think about the operating system itself as spying on you. You think about software you install later as spying on you. Unfortunately, that's not really the case with Windows, because the Microsoft Windows 7, 8, and 10, and 8.1, of course, will all spy on you. Ars Technica has a story about that, saying Windows network activity continues to be scrutinized amid privacy concerns. Windows 10 was first put under the microscope, with both new and old features causing some concern. Its new Cortana digital personal assistant, Windows 10, represents a new breed of operating system that incorporates extensive online services as an integral part of the platform. But its older predecessors haven't escaped attention either, and questions are now being asked of Windows 7 and 8 and the online connectivity of that. Unfortunately, though, if you receive regular security updates, like we all should for our Microsoft computers, then you pretty much are already wrecked. You already have this software installed that spies on you. Now, I say spies on you, but I'm sort of saying that in a perhaps overzealous way, because spying on you might be a little bit of an overreaction to what it is. It's sending information back to Microsoft servers about what you're doing. Now, that in and of itself doesn't sound that bad, because it could be for marketing reasons, which Microsoft makes tons of money off of. It could be for other reasons that we don't know about yet, some sort of new feature they're wanting to put out that's personalized to you, whatever. You can understand why this might be done. The problem is, it's pretty easy to understand that, well, the NSA or any other governmental agency, say GCHQ, whatever, could just ask for that information and have it handed over by Microsoft. Microsoft definitely doesn't want to get in the bad graces of the government yet again. Remember back in the late 90s with the antitrust lawsuit? Yeah, lots of problems were caused by the antitrust lawsuit. That was such a horrible, horrible thing. But anyway, you can see where we're coming from. So you might be asking, well, what's the alternative? What can I do to not be spied on? Well, I wouldn't trust a Apple computer either, because as open as Apple computers are, which isn't very, you still can't tell whether or not they're spying on you, because who knows what information is being sent back from your computer to Apple servers somewhere for personalization reasons or whatever, quality assurance reasons, what have you. So what would be the alternative? What can you do to make sure you're not being spied on? Well, there is an extreme that we can go to, and it might not be that nice to those of us who are used to using a particular operating system, and those of us who know to do this probably have already done it anyway. But we'll throw it out there. You can always get another operating system that's neither Windows nor Apple. It's not Mac OS, it's not Windows 7, not Windows 8, not Windows 10, it's not any of those. I run it on my computer here, and it works fine. I run Ubuntu, which is a distribution of Linux. Now, Linux and Unix are pretty closely related. There's a lot of technical stuff that I could get into, and I'd probably be wrong about some of it, and somebody would call and be all annoyed at me for getting the differences between Linux and Unix wrong, so we'll not get into that. But the main thing is Linux is somewhat similar to Mac OS. If you've used Mac OS, you might have an easier time getting into it than if you're a Windows user. That was my experience anyway. But Linux is a operating system that's totally different from anything else that you've used previously if you've not used Linux before. Actually, if you run an Android phone, you are running Linux. Believe it or not, Android is based on Linux, so you already sort of have an idea of what's going on there. Very customizable. It's open source, meaning that you can see all of what goes on in these programs. There's not really any secrets. There's no proprietary nonsense going on with these programs. It's open source, meaning you can read the source code and see what's going on in there. So you know that there's not any sort of ping to another server that's remote or anything like that built in. You know that that's not happening. So that's the benefit of using free open source operating systems. Now, there are some downsides to that, obviously, where, like, say, if I need to use proprietary software like not Open Office, I should say, Microsoft Office, Outlook Express, whatever, if I need to use something like that, Linux isn't really the best option, unfortunately. Now, there are other things you can do. You use QEMU, you can use a virtual machine, you can run it through Wine, but again, that's getting overly technical for the layman, for the average user. That would be over technical for me 10 years ago. So, it's fine. That's just how it is. So there are alternatives. I just want to open that door where there are alternatives that we can look at to Windows and Mac OS. It's not like we're stuck here being spied on. There are alternatives. So Windows 8 included many of the same online features as are now raising hackles around the internet, while it had no Cortana like Windows 10 does. And by the way, Cortana is sort of the Microsoft version of Google Now, where if you're using an Android phone, then you can say, "Okay, Google," and it'll come up with a prompt, and you can give it any question, any query you want. Like, say I want to translate something. I can say, "Okay, Google, how do you say 'I love you' in French?"
Je t'aime.
See, so you can do that sort of thing with Google, and you can supposedly do that with Cortana. You can actually install Cortana on an Android phone. I haven't done that yet because I don't really want to, but it's pretty much the same sort of thing, except it uses Bing instead of Google. So, like, we can get all sorts of different information, though. Like, just as an example, okay, Google, what year did Blade Runner come out?
Blade Runner was released in United States of America on June 25th, 1982.
See, so there's all sorts of different usages for it. But you have to understand, every time you're using it, it's using your voice print information. It's using all sorts of personal information. My voice is now logged by Google, and it has been for years and years and years because I used Google 411 going back 10 or so years ago. So there's not really any escape from it. Every single aspect of our lives is being logged by some corporation or government and is going to be used either to help us or going to be used against us. And that's where things start to get kind of interesting. Our day-to-day lives are very convenient in the grand scheme of things. I go down the street and I can order different things with, my credit card, and that's all very convenient, right? Like, but the problem is that's also kind of an invasion of my privacy at the same time. And I can use Google just the way I did, and that's very convenient, but it's also kind of an invasion of my privacy. Now, the difference is that I'm consenting to this invasion of my privacy, and I understand the risks involved. But if we're talking about, say, a security camera that also has a microphone on it that's listening to everything you're saying within a store and then using that to gather voice print information, that's kind of an invasion of privacy. And we're seeing that a lot as time goes by. And it seems that people are just sort of okay with it now. We're resigned to our fates of living in a surveillance state these days. Back in April, Microsoft released a non-security update for both Windows 7 and 8. The update is 3022345, by the way, which sounds like a made-up number, but it's actually not. It created a new Windows service that's called Diagnostics Tracking Service. Microsoft describes this service as doing two things. First, it increases the amount of diagnostic data that the Customer Experience Improvement Program, or CEIP, can collect in order to better diagnose problems. Secondly, it collects data for third-party applications that use an Application Insight Service. So the Application Insight Service is a preview that allows app developers to track performance issues, crashes, and other problems of the applications. The Diagnostic Tracking Service collects this data and sends it to Microsoft. Well, that sounds kind of okay. I mean, it's diagnostics information, but again, it's being sent without your consent in some cases. So the update that added this service itself has been superseded at least twice with two other updates. So separate from this, there's another update that has the enhanced user account control feature that enables it to collect more information from the elevation prompts. There's all sorts of different weird, crazy stuff going on with this, basically, is what we're trying to get at. Lots of weird, crazy stuff is going on with Microsoft updates, and it's yet another invasion of our privacy. Now, something else that should be noted is if you've bought a Samsung Smart TV, then there are features of that use your voice that are kind of an invasion of your privacy too if you don't know about it. Because a lot of the time it's, and especially with a Samsung Smart TV, it's enabled by default. So with the Samsung Smart TV, just as an example, you would say something to it and you could use that information as a voice, or you could use that information to, what am I trying to say? You can use your voice to transmit information to this TV so you can tell it to do things, which is all very convenient, but really not, because it'd probably be faster to use a remote control. Yeah, the Samsung smart TVs got in kind of a bit of trouble because it turned out that Samsung was constantly sending and receiving information from the smart TVs, and the microphones were kind of always on, meaning that someone could tap in and listen to everything in your living room, which is kind of, again, an invasion of your privacy. Now, that's not the big thing, though. The big thing is our phones, right? Like, I have a phone and I use it every day. I carry my phone on me all the time. We kind of all do. And it doesn't matter if you have a dumb phone or a smartphone, a dumb phone being like the Nokia that you got in 96 or whatever, and the smartphone being the iPhone or the Android phone or the Windows phone or the BlackBerry that you got. Those are smartphones. Really, the BlackBerry was the first smartphone, but that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. Anyway, if you're carrying one of these phones, then you're essentially just carrying around a tracking device. Like, there's no way around it. You are carrying around a tracking device. It's not advertised as that, but that's what it is. It is a tracking device. That is what you're carrying around every day when you're carrying around your smartphone. There's no way around it. You can walk around and you can have the smartphone, and at any point in time, a Stingray device or a cell site simulator or whatever can capture that information, find out where you are in real time, and then someone can apprehend you or go to your location or whatever. And it's an obvious invasion of your privacy because there's no warrant being involved. Especially when we're talking about law enforcement usage of these devices. Wow. There is no warrant involved, which makes it kind of illegal depending on who you listen to. Because that's where things start to get kind of annoying too, is an appeals court just recently ruled that the NSA mass data collection was actually not illegal. So is it illegal? Is it not? Does the Supreme Court actually matter in that decision? No, not really. But people are going to follow the Supreme Court decision anyway. So this is coming out of Washington, where an appeals court dealt a setback on Friday to an activist lawsuit against the government over the legality of the National Security Agency's call records program, ruling that the plaintiff has not proved his standing to sue. A three-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit ruled that public interest lawyer Larry Klayman, the founder of Freedom Watch, has not proved his own records were collected by the NSA, and so has not met a condition of bringing the lawsuit. Wow. So it sent the case back to a lower court for further deliberation of the issue. Now, good luck proving that your information was captured by the NSA, right? I mean, we can pretty much ascertain that all of our information is being captured by the NSA at pretty much any one point in time, but you can't really prove that. I mean, we know it's true, but you can't really prove it. It's sort of like apologetics, where there's no way to physically prove that this exists, but we know that it does. So it's kind of a weird correlation there. The panel's ruling also reversed a ban on the NSA's collection that had been imposed and temporarily stayed by a district court judge in December 2013. So in this activist attempt to do something good, we actually have a pretty significant setback, because now the Supreme Court has determined that, unfortunately, NSA mass surveillance is again legal. So one decision said it was illegal, another decision says it's legal, and probably 4 months down the line we'll say that it's illegal again. So who knows what's going on with this? It's ridiculous. Oh, by the way, I should let you know that there's currently a manhunt underway after a police officer was shot in Illinois. I'm trying to get more details on that, as I am the news director here at Hot News Talk Radio. And as soon as more info pops up, I will definitely let you know here on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com. So we're trying to get more information on that. Again, that's out of Illinois, where it appears that a policeman had been shot, and there's a manhunt now for the perpetrator of that. We'll try to bring you more information on that right here, Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, where we are everywhere. You can listen live at hotnewstalkradio.com or get the TuneIn Radio app for your smartphone, and you can listen to us that way as well on your smartphone at Hot News Talk Radio. So just search for Hot News Talk Radio on the TuneIn Radio app, and then you can listen to us streaming live on your smartphone that way. Also, check us out on Twitter, Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter, where you report the world decides. It's Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter. Okay, I have more information now on Illinois. It appears to be coming out of Fox Lake, I'm seeing now. Route 59 is closed, Rollins Road and Washington Avenue, and I'm trying to get more information on that now, coming out of Illinois. So there's apparently a manhunt underway in Illinois, and we're trying to get more information on that coming out. Okay, here we go. An Illinois police officer was shot this morning, according to this info, and the perpetrator is still on the loose. And that's again coming out of Fox Lake, about 55 miles north of Chicago. and the identity and the condition of the officer were not immediately available, although it does appear that he may have passed away. ABC 7 is reporting that the shooting occurred near an old cement plant. Investigators say that they were searching for 2 men and possibly a woman, and the police requested Grant Community High School go on lockdown due to activity and for the safety of our students and staff, it says. The school says. Gavin South District schools have been placed on soft lockdown as well. So as soon as more information on that comes out, we will let you know right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. Speaking of events happening, here in Chattanooga, we had a problem. When was it? Just a few days ago. It was yesterday, where hundreds of employees in the Blue Cross Blue Shield building had to leave after a fire alarm sounded at around 10 a.m. yesterday. Emergency crews responded and cleared the building to reopen. Officials say it's the largest building in the downtown area, but because the employees do drills regularly, the evacuation ran rather smoothly. I thought that was kind of an interesting piece that just came out. So the Blue Cross Blue Shield building downtown, which is the largest, was actually evacuated due to a fire alarm. It doesn't appear that there actually was a fire, but everyone got out safely anyway. And we have a ton of great programming here on Hot News Talk Radio. We have Daybreak USA in the mornings from 6 to 9. From 9 to 11, we have David Tulis, where he's on. He talks about local economy and free markets. He's always interviewing new people. He's interviewing people who work in our local economy. It's a great show. David Tulis show. Eric Judd is on. He's very lighthearted. He sort of breaks up the morning and talks about some interesting little tidbits that he finds. He's big into sports as well. It's 11 to noon is Eric Judd. 12 to 1 is my show, what you're hearing right now, Digital Drive. We're talking about technology and quite a bit more. 1 to 3, we have Clutch with Keon Rose right here, Hot News Talk Radio. Or rather, I should say 1 to 2. We have Clutch with Keon Rose. He talks about sports and his take on sports, and he's very knowledgeable about the whole sportsing thing. So if you want to hear about sportsing, you should listen to Clutch with Keon Rose right here, Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. So Congress in June put an end, supposedly anyway, to the bulk metadata collection program that the NSA had, and it passed a law that barred the government from collecting phone data and other records in bulk. But the NSA is now continuing to do it as it transitions the program to phone companies by December. In Friday's ruling, Circuit Court Judge Stephen F. Williams wrote that Clayman, a conservative legal activist, lacks direct evidence that records pertaining to his calls have actually been collected. So there's not really any way for him to prove that those records have been collected, because how is he going to obtain that? The NSA is more or less immune from Freedom of Information Act requests. So how is he going to get this information from just regular means? I mean, there's not really any way. It had to be leaked from, say, a contractor. Clayman, who's the lead plaintiff in this suit, is a Verizon Wireless customer. The only phone company that the government has acknowledged was part of the program is Verizon Business Network Services. The Justice Department declined to comment on the case. The panel's ruling actually reverses the judgment of U.S. District Judge Richard J. Leon, who found that Clayman demonstrated a substantial likelihood of success in his bid to prove that his Fourth Amendment right to privacy had been violated and that the NSA program was unconstitutional. Now, if the NSA program is ruled to be unconstitutional, which of course it is, but if a government official actually acknowledged that it was illegal, then that would be a major step forward for actually getting rid of the NSA, which is kind of a big deal, but unfortunately very unlikely to happen. The problem is, even though this mass data surveillance bulk metadata collection has been deemed to be illegal. I sort of got stuck between ruled and deemed. Has been deemed to be illegal. Who's going to enforce that? I mean, what, do you think the FBI is going to walk in and arrest the director of the NSA and arrest all the different agents who are carrying this out? That's kind of unlikely. So really, there's no enforcement in place for any of this. We're unlikely to see any sort of enforcement of any sort of law in government. That's the funny thing that has to be recognized, though, is that the government doesn't really exist within a set of laws, because they don't care. They don't have to, really. I mean, yeah, maybe say you're the president and there's a bunch of rules and regulations that are governing you, but you don't actually have to follow them. It only matters if you get caught. So just don't get caught. And even if you do get caught, it's a scandal, not really any sort of major issue. It's more a scandal than anything. So it doesn't really matter. That's the obnoxious thing about it, is that it doesn't really matter if you break the law in government, because either it'll be a scandal and you'll resign with tons of money, or it'll be an impeachment scenario and you'll get to go away with, again, tons of money, and people will back you later on, and maybe you'll have a presidential bid later on in the future. Who knows? It's a very frustrating situation. So there's not really any enforcement in government. That has to be recognized. There is like no enforcement in government, really. Like, we keep expecting that, oh, if we just elect this guy, then he'll arrest that guy, and it doesn't really work that way. No one's going to arrest anyone. There's not going to be any enforcement within government. That's simply not an option at this point. This is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, here on hotnewstalkradio.com as well. Be sure to get us on the TuneIn Radio app for Hot News Talk Radio on TuneIn for your smartphone. Check us out there on hotnewstalkradio.com as well.
This is a modern world. This is the modern world. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Sky Aerial Services uses advanced drone technology to give you a better perspective and depth of your property and project. We offer aerial photography and video for your business, farm, home, or advertising campaigns, as well as editing services to complete the experience. Call us at 423-521-0284 and see how we can help you tell your story about your business, property, or project. We work with real estate professionals, both commercial and residential, developers, engineer inspectors, surveyors, ad agencies, auto and boat dealers, mapping services, insurance inspectors, corporate marketing, charity events, weddings, and photographers. Our consultation is free. Call 423-521-0284. That's 423-521-0284, or visit our website, skyaerialservices.com. Sky Aerial Services. The sky is our limit.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Saudi Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection: loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas. Every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Saudi Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Saudi, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
This is America Now with Meghan McCain.
Al Gore running is crazy. You're flying around in your private jet all over the world, and you want average Americans to care about the environment. Don't you think you should be doing your part as well?
Meghan McCain, weekdays at 7 p.m.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, I'm David Tulis, inviting you to make the move with me 9 to 11 a.m. weekdays here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. The David Tulis Show, featuring Nooganomics.com for Chattanooga and beyond. 9 to 11 a.m. weekdays.
Hot News Talk 1240.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. Rowan County, Kentucky Clerk Kim Davis again refusing to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples.
Davis again invoking her religious rights.
Under whose authority are you not issuing licenses? I don't believe God tell you to do this.
That from the Courier-Journal. Davis now in defiance of the U.S. Supreme Court, which upheld a lower court order that gays are entitled to get marriage licenses.
Fox Radio's Jeff Manozzo. Davis has been called to a federal hearing Thursday. Some Arizona officials want a tax on adult marijuana sales to help fund public schools. The education superintendent calls the plan evil, while some say
education is already funded by those two other veins, the lottery and tobacco tax, and people have said that that's evil money.
Charter school teacher Lisa Olson is a medical marijuana user. Stocks still sharply lower. The Dow's been down around 300 points amid more weak economic news from China. Fox News, we report, you decide.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
So I've been reading about the 2038 problem, which is kind of funny. It's like Y2K except in 2038. And what happens is, instead of like what happened at Y2K, which was nothing. What happens at the 2038 problem is instead time will be displayed in seconds. which is kind of a problem. Time will be displayed in Unix, I think it's like Unicode 32-bit integer time, which is really kind of a messed up way. It'll be many seconds. So you'll see like 11021, bunch of different seconds displayed as a time instead of 1st of July or 1st of January 1910 or whatever it was that was displayed before. So the 2038 problem might be a bit more of a worry than Y2K. But anyway, that's a whole long issue. We don't need to get into that. I just thought it was kind of interesting. Look into the year 2038 problem. Very interesting. This is Digital Drive. We're talking about technology and quite a bit more right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. So if you're interested in watching interesting things, you can watch 3 astronauts get launched into the International Space Station tonight. It's about to get a little bit packed over there at the ISS. Tonight, 3 astronauts are going to be launching to the station on a Russian Soyuz rocket. Cosmonaut Sergei Volkov, Andreas Morgensen from the European Space Agency, and Aiden Aimbetov of the Kazakh Space Agency, as in Kazakhstan, are scheduled to take off from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan at about 12:37 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. When they dock with the station 2 days later, a total of 9 crew members are going to be on board the ISS, and that's only one less than the total number of astronauts in the orbiting lab can hold at a time. So there'll be 1 under capacity, basically. The crowded room arrangements are only temporary, though. The astronauts will partake in a bit of musical chairs in the next few weeks. Morgensen and Aimbetov are flying to the ISS mostly to help bring station astronaut Gennady Padalka back down, I think. Soyuz capsules need 3 people to operate them, so Morgensen and Aimbetov will return to Earth with Padalka on September the 12th. Volkov will remain on board the ISS, bringing together the entire crew of Expedition 45. These include astronaut Scott Kelly and Russian cosmonaut Mikhail Kornienko, I believe is how you say, who are currently in the middle of spending 1 year on the ISS. But perhaps the most important aspect of the Expedition 45 crew is that they are all expertly trained in the ways of the Force, according to a poster that was shown that shows them in Jedi garb with lightsabers. So you can't get much cooler than that. Expedition, it's Expedition some number 45 is what it is. Expedition 45. I'm terrible at Roman numerals. So if you're interested in watching a ISS launch, you can do that tonight at about 12:45 Eastern time. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Of course, 12:45 Eastern time is sort of a fickle number. A pickle number? Sort of a fickle number because they always delay it for some reason. Like there's wind, so we need to delay it. I mean, I know why they do it because it's a really dangerous thing to launch a spacecraft. But it's always kind of funny when they say it's going to be at 12:45 and it ends up being like 1:30 before they actually launch. So that's just the way of it, though. That's just how it be. You know how it is, man. So Pandora, if you're interested in Pandora as well, a lot of us use it. I don't, but if you do use it, then you'll be interested in this. Pandora has had a good run since it launched all the way back in 2005, according to The Verge. So when streaming music was still a nightmare plaguing music executives across the country, so that was 10 years ago. In the 10 years since it launched, Pandora's users have racked up 74 billion listening hours and created over 8 billion stations. To thank its nearly 80 million listeners, the streaming service is actually shutting down its ads for 24 hours on September the 9th. They say this is a thank you to each and every listener who has turned in Pandora in the past 10 years. Pandora founder Tim Westergren said in a statement saying it's going to be called Listener Love Day, as Pandora is calling it. It's going to be lasting from 12 a.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday to September the 9th until 12 a.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, September the 10th. So if you haven't given Pandora a try in a while, next Wednesday would be a good time to try that out, actually. I don't use Pandora not because I'm like pretentious about it. I don't know. I can't find the time to use it, I guess, maybe because I'm here at work most of the time. And I don't really have a whole lot of time to listen to music when I'm here at work because I'm editing audio a lot. So I can't really listen to music and do that at the same time because that would sort of get in the way of it because I need to hear what I'm listening to, right? So I don't know. I should try Pandora out again. Maybe some weekend or something. I'll give it a shot. But I don't know. I'm not really into the whole thing. Maybe I should do it just to discover new music because that's sort of a thing that I'm really into is discovering new, interesting music. So I should just get off my high horse and listen to Pandora and just do that and quit whining about how I don't listen to Pandora. But anyway, in New York, the taxi systems are going to be changing a little bit, which is funny actually because the taxi cabs in New York are desperately struggling to compete with Uber, which is really funny actually because Uber is not doing very well at all, or rather I should say Uber is doing very well and the taxi companies are not doing all that great is what I meant to say. Don't you hate it when you get mixed up? So what's happening is Uber is quickly overtaking the taxi companies in New York City, and that's fine and dandy. But the taxi companies are complaining about that quite a lot, particularly the TLC. The TLC is the Taxi and Limousine Commission, or actually it should be the TNLC, which is not the Learning Channel. It's the Taxi and Limousine Commission, completely different thing. Well, as of today, taxi owners in New York City are required to purchase Nissan NV200 minivans, which are the so-called taxis of tomorrow. So they're going to be replacing their current vehicles, according to New York One. This makes the conclusion of a fraught 4-year journey. New York first selected the NV200 in May of 2011, but it met with resistance, controversy, and even legal challenges over then-Mayor Michael Bloomberg's demand that taxi companies upgrade to the NV200 quickly. The small van, which actually looks oddly narrow and tall, kind of Euro-looking actually, ambling down Manhattan streets and avenues, has also gotten knocks for being a pure gas vehicle, not hybrid or electric, and for not being accessible to wheelchairs out of the box. Nissan is working on an electric version of the van called the eNV200, but the Taxi of Tomorrow specifications don't call for it. So the Taxi of Tomorrow is sort of a interesting idea, but is it actually going to take off? Is it actually going to overtake Uber? I kind of doubt it, actually, because the taxi companies are not really up to date, honestly. I mean, yeah, they can try to save face by updating with some new taxi, but it's not going to save the world or anything like they're hoping. Inside, the NV200 is actually, according to The Verge anyway, arguably a decent upgrade from the aging Crown Vics that they've been using, featuring sliding doors, pretty cool, passenger airbags, pretty safe, rear climate controls, very cool, and an electronic intercom for the driver. If you want to have a private conversation, all you have to do is turn it off. So you'll hear the taxi driver's electronic voice coming out over the speaker, so you can hear what he's trying to say. The new taxis have been available to purchase for actually some time, but this marks the first time that owners must buy them, according to New York City. That's another thing that's kind of killing the New York taxi thing, is actually New York City telling the taxi companies what they must do. It's kind of a problem, actually. That leads to very poor business practices. If you have a government telling you what you must do, that leads to some problems, to say the least. Now, we're noticing that increasingly, though, as being sort of the death of a bunch of different companies. Like GM was not doing very well. And then Cash for Clunkers came in, and that's still not really helping out GM that much. And it's amazing that GM is still around, actually. I'm actually kind of amazed there even is an American car industry a lot of times, because American cars keep being recalled and shown to be not very good compared to the Asian and European alternatives. So I don't know why actually there is an American car market half the time, but nonetheless, irregardless, as I like to say to drive my mother crazy because she is an English major, irregardless, it's a problem when government gets involved in business, because you're going to have all sorts of different problems when that starts to happen. Well, now in New York, these taxi companies must buy these different NV200 taxis. So the rule change comes just as New York's traditional taxi base is under unprecedented attack from the popular ride service Uber and Lyft, which could mean that NV200s won't flood the streets in the same way taxis of the past did. The industry is hoping that a new e-hailing app will help to turn those fortunes around. Now, something that has to be understood about Uber and Lyft and all these different taxi companies is that they can compete, right? These taxi companies can compete with Uber. We're even seeing competition here in Chattanooga, where there's competition between the taxi companies and Uber. But really, Uber is sort of the death knell for the traditional taxis as we've been seeing them in the past, where there's not really any reason to have traditional taxis as we've been seeing them in the past when you have something such as Uber. Or Lyft, of course. Why do you need a taxi company when you can just hail a ride from your smartphone? It's so easy and convenient. So the taxi companies, instead of actually trying to compete, started whining to the municipalities, saying, oh, it's not fair that they're not being taxed as much as we are, and all these different things. When in actuality, Uber's just very clever about it and was finding out new and interesting ways to not be taxed, which is very clever and is what should have happened anyway, so go figure. But the taxi companies are upset that they're being robbed more than Uber is. And really the problem is that businesses are being robbed of business money in the form of taxation. So go figure. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. We are everywhere. Listen live to Hot News Talk Radio at hotnewstalkradio.com. You can also download the TuneIn Radio app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. Hot News Talk Radio is also on Twitter, where you report the world decides. That's AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. The city of Chicago has joined a joint lawsuit against Redflex, which is an Australian company that sold the city red light cameras starting in 2013, or rather 2003. I'm way too futuristic. Redflex announced the legal action in a statement to stockholders today, sending the company's already suffering stock down to 17 cents a share for Redflex cameras. Ouch. The suit alleges that Redflex bribed a former Department of Transportation manager, John Bills, with $2 million in kickbacks to secure contracts with the city. The debacle has already resulted in corruption convictions and the company's CEO, Karen Finley, pleading to guilty to bribery earlier this year. Now, this is all very nice to me because I hate traffic cameras so much. I hate red light cameras so much because they're actually kind of illegal when you think about it. So what happens is you're driving down the street and you see behind you, because it's nighttime, we'll say, you see behind you, especially if you're on 153, you see a bright flash and a camera has taken a picture of your license plate as you go through the light that has just turned red. You really don't have time to stop, and you have a bill in the mail later on. Now, that's really not fair to you because you're being accused by a machine. So all you have to do is demand to face your accuser, and pretty much your case will be thrown out. So it's easy as that, hopefully, anyway. But the problem is people are so accepting of that. And municipalities, of course, are all too happy to have these red light cameras because they can get money in the guise of getting it for public safety, right? Like, it's all about revenue collection. But they'll use the guise of public safety just because, why not? It's really, really obnoxious. And that really is just how it is with municipalities anyway, because municipalities tend to be really, really obnoxious, especially when you have to deal with them personally. So what happens is these red light cameras start bringing in tons and tons of money because people are not going to fight these charges. People are not going to fight a ticket. Most people don't. You should, but we don't. I didn't that one time I got one. So it's just because we're lazy. We should fight tickets, but we don't. We should engage in the legal system, but we don't. That's just how we are, because we want to take the route that's most convenient. Unfortunately, the route that's most convenient tends to be the one that's, it's most damaging to our liberties, unfortunately. Oh, well, right? So what happens is people don't fight these tickets and they mail in the money. And that's then how these red light cameras start to become so popular with different municipalities. So then you start to see a situation where red light cameras start popping up all over the place, and then people start getting charged tons and tons of money. And they'll complain about it on Facebook, but when it comes to actual legal action, nothing really happens. Now, the interesting thing is a lot of these cameras have been put up by a company called Redflex. Now, Redflex is, of course, a company out of Australia that has been facing some legal problems, we'll put it that way. And this has been evidenced in Chicago, where there's a class action lawsuit. But beyond those issues, Redflex cameras have been implicated in actually faulty ticket accusations, with the company's cameras allegedly using some 13,000 undeserved tickets to motorists in 2014. That's in 1 year alone. 13,000 faulty tickets in 1 year. Redflex cameras have reportedly raised more than $500 million in traffic fines since 2003, according to the Chicago Tribune. So it's no wonder that they're very popular. The suit was filed under seal earlier this year by Aaron Rosenberg, who's a former executive vice president at Redflex who worked closely with Bills, the former CEO. Rosenberg was allegedly fired by Redflex after city officials began looking into the nature of Bill's relationship with Redflex. The fired executive alleged that Redflex knew of and encouraged the bribery, and later hired one of Bill's friends, Martin O'Malley, as a contractor for Redflex. Though O'Malley, more money was funneled to Bill's. So the complaint alleges that Redflex, as a vendor to the municipality, had to sign multiple contracts that required the company to promise that it would not engage in bribery of public officials, which is kind of an odd promise to have to make, that you will not engage in bribery of public officials, because that should just be a given, but unfortunately enough is not. The city suffered damages in reliance on Redflex false statements that it had not engaged in bribery or attempted to bribe any employee of the city, the suit is reading. The Chicago Tribune notes that the city is asking for 3 times the $124 million amount that it paid Redflex while it was in contract with the company, as well as a civil penalty of between $5,000 and $10,000 for each individual false statement made by Redflex to the city. So in a statement that was emailed to Ars Technica, Redflex reiterated its statement from last year, saying, "We took strong action more than 2 years ago, conducting an internal investigation, announcing new leadership, cooperating with law enforcement, and taking powerful specific steps to improve compliance. The new Red Flex proudly serves 170 communities around the country. We will continue to lead the industry in how private and public partnerships should be managed. How about there are no public and private partnerships? That seems like the best option. Believe it or not, perhaps the public and private industries should never actually cross, because then it leads to all sorts of corruption. Like you see even on a federal level, you have people who work for some major corporation, and then interestingly enough, that major corporation gets a contract to perform some job, even though that major corporation was not the lowest bidder and potentially is not the best company for the job. Sounds rather suspicious. We see that with, say, oil companies, who maybe the vice president is also an executive at that oil company. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. We see that a lot. And unfortunately, this happens in our area too. I mean, it's no secret that we have bad contracts and we have all sorts of horrible things going on within the municipalities. And we have red light cameras that are extremely unpopular. We have sheriffs who don't actually understand or care to understand how liberties work. We have all sorts of problems like these. And it's no secret. And people aren't as upset as they should be, really. We have a problem in our society where people want to get the word out about things, but they're just keyboard warriors, right? They're collectivists, where instead of actually being an activist and going out and doing legal things, or filing lawsuits, Freedom of Information Act requests, what have you, instead of doing that, we share stuff on Facebook and call it a job well done. And it really doesn't work that way. That's not how things change. You can't just share something on Facebook and say, job well done, I'm done for today, and I'm going to go do my everyday stuff that I always do, and I'm going to get a traffic ticket in the mail. It's not solving anything. So how do we solve problems? Well, we file lawsuits, class action lawsuits. You impeach the governor. You do all sorts of different things to change things. And really sharing Facebook articles is not any way to change anything. You're not going to change my mind about immigration by sharing some article from the Conservative Tribune about how immigrants are killing the country. It's not going to change my mind about things, because I already think the way I do. What's actually going to change things is getting laws changed, actually going off and getting lawsuits made and suing people and raising issues before the county commissions. That's actually somewhat of a change. Now, there is also another option, which is just doing things the way you want to do them without asking for permission, because that's the best way to do it. As an example, I think that driver's licenses are ridiculous and you shouldn't have to have one. So why not just not get one? I mean, birth certificates are ridiculous. So I'm not going to give my kid a birth certificate. He's not going to have a social security number. See, so it's issues like that where complaining is one thing, but acting is another, where we're against Social Security, right? Like pretty much everyone who I know is against Social Security, but they're still going to give their kid a Social Security number. What sense does that make? They say, well, it's more convenient, or, well, he might have a hard time in life later on. Well, that's something that I'm willing to deal with. I wish I hadn't been given one. I wish I didn't have a Social Security number. I really do. I wish I didn't have a birth certificate. I wish I didn't have all sorts of different things, but unfortunately, I do. And I don't want to pass that off to my kids. I don't want to pass this paper slavery off to my kids. So if I ever have children, guess what? No Social Security number, no birth certificate, none of that nonsense. And probably there actually won't be a country like this one by the time I have kids, so won't have to deal with that. But that's actual action that we're talking about, not just sharing articles on Facebook and tweeting about things, because that's not actually going to solve any problems. That's just spouting off, which has its merits, but it's not the only thing you can do. Sharing stuff on Facebook in the long run actually doesn't change much of anything except make people either agree with you or get angry at you, and that doesn't solve any problems whatsoever. So it's something that has to be made immediately known, is that sharing stuff on Facebook is not a final solution to anything ever. Well, speaking of corruption in government, a Secret Service agent has now pled guilty to stealing money from the Silk Road dealers. Sean Bridges, who's a former Secret Service agent who was investigating the Silk Road drug trafficking website on the deep web, actually pled guilty today to charges of money laundering and obstruction of justice. So the defendant, his alleged scheme was straightforward and very profitable. After Silk Road Administrator Curtis Green was arrested in January of 2013, he allegedly debriefed agents in Baltimore. Bridges then, allegedly of course, took his admin credentials and logged in and started locking Silk Road drug dealers out of their accounts. and he then looted the accounts, grabbing about 20,000 bitcoins, according to the allegations, putting them into his own account. So District Judge Richard Seaborg read out each of the government accusations against Bridges in court today, and the man responded, "Yes, sir," acknowledging that he had committed each of those acts. Bridges then moved the bitcoins allegedly into his Mt. Gox account, which were more than worth $300,000 at the time of the theft. Bridges then moved that money into a Fidelity account called Quantum International Investments LLC between March and May of that year. By then, the bitcoins were worth about $820,000. So government corruption is infecting our state at every level, especially the Secret Service. Bridges also pled guilty to obstructing the Baltimore investigation of the Silk Road and later to the internal investigation of his own behavior. At one point, he talked to a colleague who was being interviewed and agreed to tell a consistent story about his unauthorized use of the database. The plea agreement includes sentencing recommendations, but is not known what those are at this time, saying, "You don't understand, these are simply recommendations, and it will be for me to decide what the appropriate sentence is," Seaborg asked. So he's asking if Bridges understands that, and Bridges replied, "I do." Both the money laundering and obstruction counts carry a maximum of 20 years in prison. Bridges' lawyer declined to comment on what the sentencing recommendations were. He says he's regretted his actions since the beginning, and he's trying to put this behind him. Said Levin in a hallway after the proceeding. "It's a very stressful time." Aw, poor guy. So the Secret Service can commit all sorts of atrocities and really just get a slap on the wrist, but that's nothing new. You see, we see that all the time. It has to be known that there is lawlessness within the state, where, say, someone working for the CIA can commit awful atrocities and burn down a village in Guatemala and get a slap on the wrist, if that. Or a president can launder money and get away with that. You can have the Iran-Contra affair. And guess what? You have, what's his name, Oliver North, as a pundit on Fox News now. I mean, what sense? The guy should be in jail, but he's not. And you have people like Richard Nixon who commit awful crimes and then get pardoned later on. You know, how does that even work? How does that even happen? And you have George Bush, the CIA director, which in and of itself should put you in prison, but doesn't. So you have all these different awful things happening, and there's no accountability. And there's never going to be accountability, at least not within government. You're not going to see anyone, except for maybe a few choice fall guys, go to prison for atrocities that happen within government. You're simply not going to see that. This is Digital Drive right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. We're also on the internet at hotnewstalkradio.com. If you get the TuneIn Radio app for your smartphone, then you can listen to us on your smartphone as well. And that's actually how I choose to listen most of the time. Just because I'm always on my phone, so why not listen on my phone too? It's just the best way to listen. So, or one of the best ways to listen, I should say. So get the TuneIn Radio app for your smartphone, and you can listen to us streaming live that way as well. Hot News Talk Radio is also on Twitter, where you report the world decides. That's AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio. You can see all of our tweets. We tweet a lot about different things that we talk about on the air. You can always tweet at us to get in contact with us. And, of course, you can call in at 423-800-8949 here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. Clutch with Keon Rose is coming up next right here. He talks about sports. He's our resident sports expert and he's our sports correspondent right here on Hot News Talk Radio. He's going to be on in just a few seconds right here. Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode.